Gilded Sister, Chapter 16. While the twins are at school. Ornate Garden arrived home a few minutes later than usual from dropping her children off at school, having hovered outside the building and worried for them and how their day would go. When she finally did return home then, she was feeling a nervous mess and was not in the mood for any shenanigans. That's why, when her father-in-law came stumbling down the stairs bemoaning his rightfully earned hangover, she was not a happy mare. Are you really expecting pity after you spent half the day drinking with your military friends before stumbling home after midnight? Oh, have some compassion for an old stallion in his time of need, Ornate. I feel like I have an entire platoon marching through my skull, whined the very much grown adult as he slumped onto the counter. I was challenged to a drinking contest by Jelly Donut, and I had no choice but to accept. The family's honor was at stake. Yes, and I'm sure you're defending with all the valor of expected from an equestrian soldier, Ornate responded, levitating a glass of water onto the counter space in front of Stalwart, before setting a pan on the stovetop and grabbing a bowl from the cupboards. She may not have been pleased with the stallion at the moment, but she will still whip up a simple breakfast for him. Celestia knew he didn't put anything marginally wholesome into his belly last night. Lifting his head, he shined her a triumphant grin. Of course, then, Jelly Donut didn't stand a chance, he boasted, picking up the offered glass and nearly emptying it in one slam. Ornate rolled her eyes. Well, I'm glad somebody had a good day yesterday. Setting the glass down, none too gently with a relieved sigh, Stalwart tilted his head. What's that supposed to mean? Something happened yesterday. One of the twins' classmates began picking on Pureblood and her friend, explained the mother as she rummaged through the refrigerator. Things got physical. What? The stallion yelled, wincing at the volume of his own voice and missing the glare Ornate sent at him. He has nearly made her drop a carton of eggs with that. Is Pure okay? She's not hurt, if that's what you're asking, she answered, her voice carrying the slightest air of exhaustion. Blue Blood tried to stand up for her and got punched in the nose, though. It didn't leave much of a mark, unlike Pure's buck to the colt who did it. Is that so? Stalwart said, scratching his chin in thought. Yes, she apparently knocked the foal, a colt big for his age, right off his hooves and had him crying. There was no pride in her voice as she reflected this fact, unlike Stalwart's shield. Good, the stallion declared, stomping a hoof on the counter. What? Ornate looked up from the bowl she was just finishing cracking 3 eggs into and turned her head. Great even, he continued, oblivious to the incredulous glare directed at him, or the heat growing there. A bucket was. I knew it'd be a good idea teaching her that. Proper follow-through is everything, you know. Most ponies go their whole lives just using their back legs to buck, when they should be putting their whole body into the motion. Pushing off just a bit with your front legs turns a good buck into a downright deadly one. Wait, are you saying you've been teaching my daughter how to fight? Questioned the pink mare, eggs forgotten as she faced her father-in-law fully. Of course not, he answered, bringing a momentarily sense of relief to the mother before he added, I've taught Blue Blood too, though he still has trouble keeping his stance consistent. He'll get it down soon, I am sure. Nodding to himself, confident in his grandson's future progress, he missed the slack-jawed look of the mare across the counter. A few seconds later, his ears were assaulted by a shrill cry of, What? As Ornate stopped right up to his pained face. I agreed to let you exercise with the twins, not turn them into ruffians. What else have you been teaching them? Am I going to get called into school to find out one of them has crippled a classmate? Nothing. I haven't taught them anything else yet, Shill defended, cowering as he was reminded of his own wife when she became irate. Why did he have to open his mouth when they were in the kitchen, surrounded by sharp cutlery? I wasn't going to start serious combat training until next month. You won't be starting it at all unless you want to find out what it's like to build Gilded. Ornate informed, branching a butter knife. What should have been comical was all the more terrifying as images flashed through the old stallion's mind, turning his face green. Of course, no combat training, but where was I thinking? He said in a placating manner and forced a chuckle. Just put the knife down, or at least promise you'll use something sharper to kill me with. Holding the glare for several uncomfortable seconds longer, she slowly pulled the butter knife away from the stalwart's nose, though never putting it back down, and said, "You'd live." Crossing his back legs, he muttered, "Right, listen. Ornate, I apologize for teaching your children that without running it by you at the time, I wasn't thinking beyond wanting the two of them to be able to defend themselves, or at least some degree in case the worst would ever come to pass. I hardly think they're at risk of attack, Shield. They're children," Ornate said incredulously. "Aren't they?" Stalwart countered, eyes hard. "Maybe. I'd think the same had my own son not been nearly full now before he'd barely even seen half a decade." Ornate was stunned at that. "What?" Nodding gravely, Stalwart explained. "It was his 5th birthday when it happened. Princess Celestia allowed us to throw the party at the castle grounds. Bluebell always loved big parties, almost as much as showing off her son." His gaze grew distant as he remembered. "So, of course, all of Canterlot ended up knowing about the party, and at least half of them were invited. The princess even took time out of her schedule to attend. I swear she doted on the little lad nearly as much as his own mother." He chuckled for a moment at the fond memory, before becoming grave once more. Every pony there could see how much Her Majesty cared for her nephew. It was heartwarming for most, but an opportunity for a couple who had managed to sneak in. To this day, I couldn't get my mind around what they were thinking, even after they were interrogated. They're young teenagers, full of the recklessness that came with it. The mare, born to a noble family, fell in love and had gotten pregnant with the foal of a commoner, and was kicked out of her house because of it. Bluebell, bless her heart, was furious about that and wanted to give the girl as much as she could even after the fact, but it didn't excuse what she and her sleazeball boyfriend did. He convinced her to fake going into labor while in the garden as a distraction. She was far enough along nobody suspected a thing while he tried to lure my son away. Blue blood, though, he was smarter than that, and he refused, so the stallion turned to force. How he expected to make it out of there with a screaming colt, I haven't the foggiest. Or how he'd actually ransom our son back to us doesn't matter, though, since it wasn't long before I caught up to him. Broke one of his legs in 3 places when I did too. All my fear turned to anger. Those are things I hope you never have to experience, Ornate. It haunted me for months afterwards." Ornate was wide-eyed and spellbound by the story, staring at the stallion before her in a new light. "And what happened after?" she prompted. Stalwart shrugged tiredly. "The stallion was in prison, though he was released some years back. I looked into it, of course. He fled to some settlement on the outskirts of the kingdom, and I can only hope he's a changed pony. The mare, well, all the stress of that day had her going into labor for real, and it was a healthy foaling, and she was allowed to stay with her child on parole. Bluebell and the princess took care of her, but I admit to not wanting anything to do with her, mad as I was, so I don't know the specifics. Parties were different from then on. Bluebell never threw them as large after, and was always diligent about invites and knowing every pony there. There's something the two did manage to steal from us, not our child, but that joy. Every birthday after that was less a celebration for her and more a reminder." The two were silent for a while until Ornate spoke. "Blueblood never told me." "We made it a point not to talk about it around him," Stalwart explained. "We'd hope he'd just forget or repress the memory. He was young, and we didn't want his birthdays to be ruined like they were for us. Maybe it worked, or maybe he avoided speaking about it around us to try and keep us happy." "That's why I started training him, you know," he said, looking down at the nearly empty glass of water and swirling the contents. "I didn't plan on not being there to protect him, even before he was nearly stolen away, but that didn't stop it from happening. So I wanted him to be able to protect himself. It helped my peace of mind knowing that he wouldn't be defenseless. And I suppose it's why I was teaching the twins how to buck properly. Maybe it's ridiculous. Canterlot's one of the safest places you could raise a foal, but I still worry about it. I want those two to be as safe as possible, and this is my way of ensuring that. The truth is, Ornate, as much as we want to be there for them every moment of their lives to protect them, it's just not possible. We've got to hope and put our faith in the ponies around us to look out for them too, and that can be hard sometimes. Once again, silence dominated the room as the pink mare eventually turned around and began whisking the eggs before turning on the stove. She levitated a few spices from the rack, sprinkling them in, dumping the mix into the pan with a bit of butter. With nothing but the sound and smell of sizzling eggs to fill the air, Starward began to feel regret. He had wanted her to understand his motives, but it seemed he instead inflicted her with the same fear he had been scratching at the back of his mind ever since he saw the twins riding on Celestia's back at their first birthday. They were precious to the Alicorn, and that made them potential targets to anyone wanting to hurt her, and he knew how unlikely that was to occur. He scared a new mother for nothing, piling yet another worry onto her already burdened withers. It was while he was trying to think of a way to alleviate the mare's fear that she finally broke the silence. You have to teach them responsibility, too, if you're going to teach them how to defend themselves, she said, placing a plate of scrambled eggs and buttered toast before the stallion. And of course, actually tell them what they're learning. It seems like they should have been obvious. Looking from the plate to her, all Starward could imagine was, what? You can teach the twins how to fight, she clarified, but you have to be sure they understand the responsibility that comes with knowing. It's for defense only, not so they can hurt others. A small smile slowly spread across his muzzle as he dawned on him. Of course, don't know what I was thinking, teaching them that buck without teaching them how and when to use it. Neither did I, Ornate agreed, giving a small smile of her own. Now eat your eggs and drink some more water. It'll help the hangover. She began to leave the room, adding over her shoulder, and clean up after yourself when you're done. I'm not your mother. Will do, he called back, half of his eggs already demolished along with a slice of toast. Starward wasn't sure how his son managed to catch himself such a fine mare. Guess luck must have run in his side of the family. Blue Blood the 16th sat at his desk, going over papers and letters from across Equestria. The noble house of Blue Blood had land holdings and investments all over the kingdom, and it was his job as head of the family to keep track of it all and make sure the ledgers were in order. It was all very taxing on both the spirit and the eyes, so when he heard the door of his study creak behind him, it was a welcome distraction. How are you doing, honey? His wife asked as he pulled his reading glasses off and rubbed between his eyes. Everything okay in here? It's fine, he answered. Everything seems to be in order so far. How about you? Coming up behind him, she laid her head on his shoulder with a small sigh. I had an interesting conversation with your father just a while ago, she began. Did you know he taught Pure some sort of military buck? Guess that explains how she was able to take on a colt larger than herself. He did what? She chuckled at that. Yes, that was my reaction, though a few decibels louder. The soundproofing on this room is phenomenal. Blue Blood didn't find the humor, however, and began to push away from his desk. I am so sorry, Ornate. I never would have thought my father would do something so reckless. I'll have a talk with him and put a stop to this before he goes any further than already has. His attempts to stand was halted by a hoof on his shoulder. It's already done. Starward and I had a very long discussion about it, and I agree to let the children learn from him, with the condition that he teaches them restraint as well. You did? He asked, incredulous, slowly letting the hoof push him back into his seat. Why? I figured it would be good for the twins to know how to defend themselves and each other is all. I don't plan on letting them ever be in a situation where they need to know such a thing, but it's better to be prepared, right? As she explained this, she draped herself over her husband's withers and pressed a kiss to the side of his muzzle. You never know what could happen. She tightened the hug and gave him another kiss, leaving him to place a hoof on hers and ask, "What brought this on?" "I am just grateful you're here," was the peculiar reply, and Blue Blood couldn't help but smile. "Where else would I be?" Turning his head, he met one of her kisses with his own. "Where else would I rather be?" he added before going in for a deeper kiss, and his wife gave a small moan of approval. When they separated, he couldn't help but get somewhat serious. "You really are serious about letting Father teach the kids how to fight? He's not the easiest teacher, and they are quite young." "A lot younger than I was, I'm pretty sure." "He knows not to overdo it, or else he'll get the butter knife," she said with a curt nod. Blue Blood raised an eyebrow. "Do I even want to know?" No, you don't." "Okay then." Leaning forward, the stallion looked at his paperwork with a tired sigh as wife placed her front hooves down on the ground. Maybe I'll talk to him about teaching the twins. I remember most of what he taught me, I'm sure, and that way I can make sure he doesn't teach the twins anything too dangerous." "Really? I thought you hate training with your father." "Oh, I do, but honestly, it'll be nice to get some exercise after sitting in this office for so long," he answered. "Plus, I'll get to spend more time with my children while I supervise them." Coming up to give him another kiss on the cheek, Ornate said, "Thanks, Blue. I'll feel a lot more comfortable about this if I know you'll be there watching over them." "I'd do anything for our children, love, even spend time with my drill sergeant of a father," he replied, leaning his head against hers. Giggling, Ornate gave him a slight swat and backed away. "I'm sure your Father of the Year mug will be coming in the mail any day now," she joked, heading toward the door. "You want me to bring you anything? Some tea? A snack?" "I'll be fine," he answered, putting his spectacles back on. "I should be done soon enough. Then we can have tea and biscuits together." "Okay. Love you, dear." "Love you too," and with that, the door was closed and Blue Blood was left to return to his work. Picking up a quill, the stallion shot a brief glance out the window, imagining the warm sunlight on his coat as he spent time with the twins. The image was enough to get him through the last of his paperwork.